Hi, welcome to Portal to the New Earth. Today, I'm really honored to have John L. Peterson as my guest. I first learned about his work just recently, last fall of 2024, and here we are, March of 2025. And he was being interviewed on Robert Edward Grant's think tank. And Robert Edward Grant is someone I've been following very closely for a number of years. And I was really intrigued by John's background. He's founded the Arlington Institute as like a futurist think tank all the way back in 1989, and he's worked with various government agencies, and he's been working and forecasting what kind of future, but a very positive, heart-centered future. So I really, really resonated with him. I contacted him, sent him a copy of my book, which he graciously ordered from me, and now he's actually invited me to come and present at one of his transition talks, which is why I was contacting him because he does host very many interesting guests over the years. And I was excited to be able to be featured with his work. And so I'm really grateful to have him today to dive into his whole backstory and what visions he has and what we can do to create this positive, heart-centered, organic, thriving future that benefits all of life. So thank you so much for being here today, John.
It's really nice to be here. Thanks, Harlan. Nice to have me.
Yeah, so why don't you just kick it off a little bit with your, background, how you got to be doing this work, with future studies and, you've been doing this a long time now. So a little background as to, the fact that you've been focusing on this work for quite a while.
Well, my background is rather quite varied, and I've done so many different kind of things. But the long and short of it is that through a series of kind of business upsets, problems that had, we moved from Chicago, where I ran an advertising agency that I started, to Washington, D.C. in 1989 to start the Arlington Institute. And the objective of this little think tank, Washington's full of think tanks. There were about 85 of them or something back then in Washington when I started the Arlington Institute. But the objective was, in our particular case, was to try to influence the leadership of the military to help change the notion of national security. I was concerned, having attended National War College and the Naval War College and some other things as part of my Naval Reserve duty as a naval officer, that I was concerned that there was there were significant kind of things coming downstream that were not part of the assessment and evaluation that the military did. And in particular, there's social value shifts. You're seeing them all around us now. There's technology, an exponential increase in technology. You see that now. There's environmental issues. You see that now around us, and the whole possibility of a climate change where things get really cold in a hurry and so on. And so, and all of those were, you could see the early indicators of them back in the early 90s. And that's what framed my interest, because I had been a naval aviator and flown off aircraft carriers. And so I knew that kind of business, and was kind of came out of the Midwest and thought it was kind of my duty to contribute to my country. And that process disabused me of those kinds of ideas after a while, because you became aware of the way the system really worked. And that's why I ultimately wanted to try to change the system. And we started that with the Arlington Institute. And so then we ended up working with a lot of the leadership of the military, from the Navy and the Air Force and the Coast Guard and the Marine Corps, specifically to try to broaden their horizons, to see that national security was not just about killing people and breaking things. And we did that throughout the Clinton administration. And then toward the end of that, and it had started a little bit earlier, but I had some really anomalous epiphanal kind of experiences. In one case, found myself out of my body, just out of the blue. In another case, I had some epical thing that happened where, for a short period of time, I had complete knowledge of kind of about everything. And what that convinced me was of that the reality was not like my electrical engineering professors had taught me in college, and it was far different or significantly different than what I had already always assumed. And so that drove us into a very unconventional kind of approach. I call it kind of a layered approach that has conventional wisdom and unconventional wisdom on the top, and that's unique in the futures business because most people who are trying to anticipate and think about the future are doing it in very conventional kind of terms. I came to the conclusion after these kinds of experiences and a number of others uh, that there was all kinds of other stuff going on in other dimensions and other spaces, and they were all influencing this reality in a very, very real way, and that it needed to be integrated. It needed to be part of the equation that you analyzed when you thought about all what was coming downstream. And what's coming downstream is just the biggest change that is, we've seen in kind of recorded history almost. Huge kind of fundamental shifts that are going to make everything quite different in the near future than it's been in the past. And if you want to try to think about that and what it might be and how you might anticipate it and how you prepare for it and so on, then what you have to do is you've got to be dealing with a full deck. You got to see all the pieces of it. And if you don't have all the pieces of it, then you're going to get surprised. And I can tell you that this is not a time to get surprised because the surprises are really, really big. And what that does is just drive you into fear. And when you're into fear, then you're not thinking very well, and you don't have all your faculties kind of fired up and working well because you're afraid. And so that sets up a very interesting environment for somebody in my business, is to be able to integrate from all of these different kind of perspectives and build some kind of a synthetic, very dynamic and moving set of pictures, not a specific one, but a set of pictures about what kind of possibilities might be coming downstream. And like I say, what you can do about it and how you can prepare yourself for it. And so that's what we do.
Right. I think it's a really good point. And, one point you made was you had these spontaneous experiences where you saw kind of through the 3D veil of humans that were kind of locked into this false matrix, as it might be called, that's kind of a fear controlled. And the fact, though, I think what's really important is that we have this ability to kind of choose or create our future by seeing the big picture, like you're saying. Like, your work for many years has been to look at everything to anticipate the future, like coming from a very practical background years ago for security purposes, military purposes. And, we do kind of see, though, that the military is kind of set up to perpetuate that kind of business as opposed to, bringing about a peaceful world. So that's a major shift to propose to military people. But I think the main point is this idea that we, choose, create our reality and choose, and that there's also like a lot of talk about even a split, that people may choose the more fear-based path and go that way, and we're choosing a more heart-loving, peaceful path. And you're kind of pointing that out and bringing people together on that. It's interesting because I just watched your recent interview that had both Greg Braden and Frank. What's Frank's last name?
Jacob.
Yeah,
Jacob.
Jacobs. Because I've been watching him, and they were kind of like coming from two different perspectives on it. And Greg Braden is very highly, popular, many books, highly revered, but he was kind of talking about a certain like negative view. And I kind of was getting the feeling that he's even kind of part of bringing about more fear based that these aliens are going to come and take over and we have to live with them. And it was
Well,
strange. And, but anyway, I
Carla,
go,
this is important. This is important, and we need to talk about this
good.
because there was a point early on, I had never heard of it before, and somebody came up to me and said, "What do you do?" And I explained, and they said, "Oh, you're a futurist." And I said, "Oh, what's that?" And then I became one, I guess. Well, there are a number of different kind of synonyms for being a futurist. One of them is being a forecaster, and some of my friends prefer that kind of moniker. And so, if you think of the business that I'm in as being kind of forecasting, then the natural kind of parallel is to weather and weather forecasters. And so let's talk about that a minute. So if you're a weather forecaster and you see that there is a big hurricane that's inbound coming your way, and say you're on the ocean coast on the east coast of Florida, say in Jacksonville, and there's a big hurricane headed that way, and all of the projections say that it's going to hit the country, hit the state somewhere up lower or north or south, or maybe over the middle of Jacksonville. Now, you tell me, if you're the forecaster, is your job to not tell anybody about this big storm that's inbound because they might get afraid or they might not be able to handle it or not? Is that the way? And are you supposed to run your life? And particularly in this way, kind of always saying, well, is that going to make somebody unhappy? Is that going to make somebody afraid? No, as a matter of fact, all of us make our own decisions in those terms, in those cases. And they're influenced, of course, by our backgrounds, who we came from, what our parents, how we were raised, what are our experiences, and other things. And I can give you any number of personal experiences where, I and another one of my friends were standing one place and watched the same thing and came to two dramatically different assessments about what in fact had happened. And so you can't, I mean, I am not in the business, nor can't be responsible and be in the business and say, I have to anticipate and try to figure out how you're going to respond to this, because you may say, hey, thanks for, as many people have done, say, thanks for giving me the warning. Now, what should we do and how should we do this? And so I have a hard time, and this is not uncommon. I had somebody just last week that raised the same kind of question, and it's about an article that I'd written that it's going to be published in a magazine. And they said, oh, it generates fear. And I say, that's your problem. It's not mine. I mean, I don't decide how you think. I don't decide how you respond. And you can certainly respond, like I say, like bunches of people do. And they send me very thankful notes saying, thank you for making us aware of this so that we can prepare. And so I think that that's what this is all about. There are some really big, extraordinary things coming downstream. And if you're not aware of them, then you get surprised and then you get driven into fear. Now, that's what you really don't want to be. And so I think it's really important. What you can't do is give it a bunch of emotions. I mean, you work it in your head, not in your heart, if you will. And so you need to be aware. I mean, you don't want to be ignorant, do you? I mean, that's it. Nobody, how can you? I mean, that's the de facto kind of argument for saying, don't make me afraid. Well, then say, well, then you can live in your ignorance, I guess, I can, and I'm not prepared to do that. What I'm in the business of is trying to be honest and as comprehensive and explicit as possible about what I see and what our kind of indicators and our sources say, and then that at least gives people the full capacity to kind of respond effectively and appropriately to what might happen.
That's a great analogy with the weather forecasting. And so interesting, a few thoughts came up. Most recently, there's a big typhoon hurricane heading towards Australia. And a friend of mine there put out a post saying, hey, can you help assuage this? That's possible when people know you can actually lessen the damage. And I do remember, though, I was living down in southern Florida when a huge hurricane, I remember the name was going to be Hurricane David, and they said it's coming right our way. Everyone prepare. And it totally missed and nothing happened. And then a few years
Yeah.
later, I was in New York City. Same thing, hurricanes coming. People were taping the windows, stocking up, and then the hurricane was averted. So I think knowing what's coming can both prepare you, not be in fear, but it also can help to change the situation, that there is the possibility.
Oh,
And with weather is an interesting thing because people would say weather is just weather. That's what happens. But a lot of people lately are talking about weather modification, intentionally created negative weather that's been happening. Also, I mean, just through time, I mean, the Native Americans had their rain dances, and that our consciousness interacts with our external
absolutely.
reality in ways more than just in a 3D linear way. And I think, that's one of the things which I think,
Well,
you kind of
absolutely.
talk about
Yeah.
and are helping people to wake up to this multidimensional aspect of the influence of our minds. And like you said, though, if people respond out of fear, well, that's their choice, but you don't have to. You take the information that you're looking at for the future and then respond in a way that helps steer the course, that reality, the future isn't 100% set. We are all doing it interactively.
Well, yes, and it's very much a product of the decisions that people make. It's the imagery that and the mental models and ideas that they carry in their head. It's a product of the emotions that are generated of it. So that if you've got a bunch of people who are all thinking that the hurricane may go some way different than the way it's kind of headed, then it's distinctly possible that you could influence it. And by the way, the rest of the weather, I've got friends who have gone off on their porch and said, "Go away!" when a storm was coming that was going to rain, and there was a hole in her roof, and it hadn't been fixed yet, and the rain, and it all quit, and it went somewhere else. I mean, so there's all this inner. That's why I say there's this kind of conventional and this unconventional aspect of this world, and you need to have the full spectrum. You need the full deck to have some kind of understanding about where not only how it behaves and so on, but how it might then where it might go.
Yep. And like I say though, you really work on painting a very positive future. There's so many people out there that see what's happening. They talk about climate change, they talk about this and that, and they really propose a doom and gloom scenario, extinction of life and this and
Well,
that.
there's
And you could look at it both ways, and the facts will support you both ways. They're not like just being negative. They're basing on an intellectual, factual, looking at what's going on, and you're doing the same thing, but you really are doing, and that's why we're having this discussion together today because we both share this very
yeah,
positive way of trying to help influence the future by seeing these pieces of the puzzle, but then showing and explaining how we can really get to this, most beautiful,
sure.
thriving planet that we all, want. That I don't know, we all want, but like Charles Eisenstein's famous quote, the more beautiful world that we know our hearts can create, right? So yeah.
Yeah, well, the if you're going to build, if you want a new world, if you want something better than what is, and particularly in my business, if you look out on the horizon and say, God, look what's inbound and what's coming. I really don't want to be a part of that. Then what you start to have to do is start building alternative visions for about an alternative and where you could go, something else that you could do. Um, Otherwise, I can assure you that all of the money and the effort and the influence is all piled up on top of it, and the technology is piled up on the side that's driving the narrative that says this thing is going down the toilet, or all you need is more technology. And by the way, we'll digitize everything and control your life. It's a real Matrix movie kind of scenario, frankly, and that's where it really seems like it's going. But if you don't want to play that game, if you don't want to do that, I mean, this is the opportunity for kind of the giant leap of evolution. I mean, for consciousness raising. You call it ascension, call it whatever you'd like to, but that's the essence is to do something different. See the world in a different way. See yourself in a different way. Don't get swept downstream by all of that. And so, in the midst of all this giant cacophony and unstructured, unpredictable kind of world, then what I'm in the business of trying to do is say, so what is an alternative? Where could we go? How could we do that? And as you well know, some of our projects are specifically aimed at saying, how do you start to build a new world? How do we get off the track? The big train's coming down and it's blowing its whistle, and you either got to get off the track, or it's going to be a rather negative kind of situation. And so that's what we try to do.
So one of the biggest things that's being discussed these days is what I would consider a double-edged sword, and I'd like to know your thoughts on AI. Like I was able to use AI to create this beautiful image of an organic future city, and I started to dabble a little bit, with just working with ChatGPT as like a life coach, business coach, and I really couldn't get over the hurdle of interacting. But other people, of course, are diving in, and there's a lot of talk, though, of both a negative and positive future that AI is creating. And I'd love to hear your thoughts because, well, one of the person I was working with on ChatGPT, he looks at AI as something that you would love, that you want to use it and out of love and in a positive way. And there is so much that AI can do to assist us to create this new positive future. But then there's so many people talking about a negative AI, takeover and all this stuff, which is like, if you think about it, then maybe you're creating it. So I'd love to hear your thoughts because we're really on this cusp of AI becoming such a major force in our reality right now.
Yeah. Yeah, that's quite perceptive. The AI and just about everything else, I guess, is basically fungible. You can use it for any of a number of things. It's like money. I mean, you can use it to buy drugs, or you can give it away in philanthropic ways. It's like an automobile. You can use it to go rob a bank, or drive over the top of some old woman in the crosswalk, or you can take a vacation to a beach. And so the stuff is, it's the technology in and of itself is essentially neutral, and it could be adapted to and utilized in any of a number of ways. AI is central and to the world that's emerging because it's so big and so powerful, and it's increasing at literally exponential terms. I mean, the people who are in the business that I read about and listen to and watch literally say that they have to look at the scientific literature every day, and they cannot miss one day, or something is going to happen because that is going to put them at a distinct disadvantage to everybody else, because every day there is some extraordinary kind of breakthrough. Well, that sets up the situation that you're now talking about, saying, so now this amazingly capable tool, if you will, you can use it any of it in a couple of ways. Now, I came out of there, my origins, I guess, and originally were that would be taken and uh, used as the basis for trying to build weaponry so that you could get to the an advantage over whoever the, the enemy of the week was. I don't know, whoever it was. And certainly, depending on, uh, Willis Harman was a friend of mine, and Willis Harman was a guy in the San Francisco area who ran an organization called the Institute for Noetic Sciences that Ed Mitchell, the astronaut, started. And Willis wrote a book in the '60s called Global Mind Change, and he essentially argued that the world was going to change based upon the mind shift that people have in the way they see things. Well, that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about how you see the world and what's your value system and other kinds of stuff, because the tools that are available to you will use then to execute that on around that mind, that grid, that paradigm, that presumption about how things work and what's important and so on. And so there's a whole bunch of people, they got a lot of money and they got the big computers and stuff, and they're going to try to drive this down this track that is really fear-based. And they're going to advertise, as they do all the time, how horrible it's going to be, and this is blowing up and so on, and you really need the government and you really need this technology, and it's going to make your life so much easier. And to the extent that you buy into that and you don't think about what's happening here, and you don't have a clear sense of who you are and where you're going and what your purpose in life is, then it's going to be very, very interesting to just listen to the radio or watch the news and let them tell you over and over again, COVID, 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 facts, or whatever the issue is at the moment is, and they are going to, and you will believe what you're told, because you believe what that source is, and you believe it's accurate. And so that's one huge kind of direction this is going. And if you don't have a counter to that, then that's where it's going to go, because, like I say, that's where the money and all the effort and the big computers and the press and the media and the entertainment industry and everything is on that side. And so, in the face of this kind of an epical kind of change, is what we need to do is plot a new course. We need to find a new, different way to utilize the technology, because you can't live without a phone. You can't, these things have been integrated so much into our lives, and it would be hard to do what we all need to do if we didn't have, at least the telephones and the computers that we have. But the point is, or the question is, how do you essentially hack this? How do you take advantage of the system? How do you utilize this technology to take us in a new direction? And AI is a perfect example of that, because what AI has is the ability to aggregate and present alternatives and assess information that we can't do it in just in a usual kind of human can't. Their minds don't work big enough to do that. So you can get answers and possibilities and options and things very quickly. That can be the basis for building this alternative track that goes to a new world. I'm working with Mike Adams, who is the founder of Brighteon, who has put almost $1 million of his own money into building a new AI that was trained on our kind of stuff. That's trained on metaphysics and alternative health and alternative energy and, Joe Mercola, Dr. Mercola, and we at the Arlington Institute have given him thousands and thousands of books that we've digitized so that we have a tool, an AI tool that we can use specifically for that'll be available to anybody for free, frankly, by the way, like Google, but they're not going to capture all your information and stuff. But anyway, it'll be available, and that it will allow us to run, increase the metabolism of how the whole system kind of thinks about and considers and builds and designs this new world. And that's what we're here at the Arlington Institute. That's specifically what we're trying to do, not only to work with Mike and he calls his new machine, it's called Enoch, is the large language model, and it'll be out here in another week or two. And when it comes out, then you can use it just like Google. You can look at it for searching, but it's smart, so you can ask it questions about give me a design for this or whatever. But it will understand this full, much larger spectrum. At the same time, we're going to plug that into a program that we call TransitionNet, which is a global collaboration platform. If you're thinking about this and say, well, if we're going to get a new world, if we need a new world, if we need an off ramp off from where we're going, how do we build that? How do you design that thing? Well, I think that this is a marvelous opportunity to have a grassroots, from the ground up, global kind of conversation that is focused and it's curated and it's managed, because I don't want a million people all just, saying, what do you think? But we focus this on a process to literally, through a set of sequences and projects, is to build the beginning of a new model for a new world based upon new sets of ideas and principles and values and assumptions and goals. And that you start with that, and that becomes kind of the animating structure that influences everything else. And then you do a series of projects about transportation and energy and education and whatever else that you want, always making sure that these new kind of areas not only take into consideration all of the external kind of environmental changes and the technology and the other kind of stuff, but you also have to make sure that it's consistent with these new sets of values and principles and stuff. And if you do that, then you can start to, in a relatively short time, I believe, is get a basic architecture, kind of a, you're not going to run this down to granularity where you kind of predict who does what and whatever. But if you get a basic kind of notion about how the different pieces kind of fit together and how they interconnect between each other and so on, and it's the product of a global conversation, that the way we're designing it is that there are local communities. It works around local communities who are organized specifically so that they can not only find each other, whether it's in Berlin or Sao Paulo or Tokyo or San Francisco, that have these common interests, because this is a new world and we all need to get together and we need to have community. But it also, then they can play an active role in being tasked to think about specific aspects of this new world. So if there's one of these communities that has chosen to be focused on education, and there's, by the way, maybe a dozen other communities around the world that have just chosen education, well, they can all talk to each other and they can be tasked. And so that you can look at it and say, well, we need to think about this. What kind of emerging technologies are there that could be useful for it? And so you send that tasking out to all of these people, and they all work on it themselves, and then they cross-fertilize across them, and then they throw that all into the middle, and we build add it to appropriately vet it, all kinds of things. But we add it to a model and accumulate an accreting model that is building dynamic on a week to week basis about how this new world might work. And, you can change, it's got feedback loops, so it can change direction if you need to, because you're going to probably have to do that. But it starts to get, number one, not only a vision, a specific kind of idea that is internally consistent, and is, you also have a constituency of a whole bunch of people who, if can start working on that world. And what you get is entrainment, because you get a whole bunch of people who are all thinking about the same thing, different, slightly, somewhat differently, but all in the same direction. And you can literally manifest that world. And that's what we're trying to do here at the Arlington Institute.
Well, that's really interesting about this new AI that your friend Enoch is developing imminently. You mentioned this idea to also start your transition net, and that reminds me that around the same time last fall that I connected with you, I also learned about this organization called Gaia Net, and it's a community of global people, mostly founded in Europe. And to onboard into it, you need to apply or be invited and then do an interview. And I actually joined it. And when I first joined it, I connected with a couple of people, especially the person that onboarded me and this other woman that invited me. And since then, though, I haven't been using it. But it is like this, Gaia Net connection of all kinds of very interesting, forward-thinking people. Very much sounds like what you want to do with Transition Net. And maybe instead of reinventing the wheel with Transition Net, maybe there's a way to combine these visions since they are the same essentially. But
Well,
I'd
we'll
like to
check
ask
it
you,
out.
if you've been using AI in any of the work you do, and just like obviously I mentioned that I used it to generate an image, I've been using AI just a little bit to actually write in the last few videos I've done on this YouTube channel to help me write the description for it. And so I plug in the few points and it spits out a whole nice, much better than like I struggle to write well or fill in all the details. So I've been using it, for something like that. And I don't, it seems helpful and useful. And I'll adjust it if need be, if there's some discrepancies with what it puts out. But
Sure.
have you dove in? Because it seems like AI would be something perfect for the work you're doing to put in all the ideas or information that you're looking at and to try to put together a bigger picture of it. And I wonder if you've already yet used it or if you're just waiting to use this new AI that's coming out. So what your relationship is so
Well,
far.
there's two points to that, and one of them is that these new large language models, some of them in particular, are very, very good at writing computer code. And so I am talking to a number of people, putting a team together, literally, the part of which their purpose is to evaluate the utility of AI for being able to write the code around this whole uh, collaboration network. And uh, my friends who are really advanced programmers are telling me that AI will increase their productivity 100 times, and you'd have a similar kind of decrease in costs associated with it. So you can move very quickly and get very smart things done. On the other hand, the AI that Mike Adams is putting together, the Enoch package, is going to be generally, like I said, generally available to anybody on the net. But for those of us who have contributed to it, what he is doing is providing the software and the program to us. And what I want to do is plug that into the transition net process so that it will be directly involved in all of the deliberations and the assessments and the suggestions, and that all of these groups all over the world are, together are working on different aspects of building this model of the new world. And so I don't think you can get there from here without using it. I don't think yeah, because you're at such a disadvantage because the other side is working and going so fast, and so in a in a direction that you're not interested in. And so, if we're going to go in a different direction, we really need to utilize this technology, and we need to plug it into not only just answering questions like you say or building pictures and so on, but and make it an integral part of the decision making kind of process in a global communicate, collaboration kind of effort to build a new world. It's very important, I think.
All right. Well, yeah, that's great that, you see it in that way and in a positive light. And like you say, what a valuable tool that we can, utilize for this, create the positive world that we're moving towards. So, okay, you've been in the Washington, D.C. area for quite a while now and working on the fringe with government agencies and things like that. And so I almost hesitate to ask, but right now in the current climate with Trump coming in and bringing Elon Musk, and it's really the first time, and I've been, first of all, I've been apolitical my whole life. I've never registered to vote. I don't acknowledge our current political system as being a valid way to, administer humanity on the planet. I come in with a very cosmic perspective of, natural law and order. And, when I look at how the rest of the universe operates, they don't have political systems, they don't use money. And that's how I think and see that humans can operate on planet Earth. So I've really never acknowledged it. But I do lately, I'm following, it comes up in my YouTube feed now, all of these crazy meetings that, Trump and even JD Vance, who I had no idea who he is, and I get a really good vibe from him. Musk, I'm on the fence with, but what he's doing and people, and it's so interesting because there's so much hate being, put against them for what they're doing. So why not, since it's right, we're right in the midst of it, I'd love to get your 2 cents. You don't have to go too much into detail, but since you are right there in the Washington,
Yeah.
D.C. area, what your take is on this current political situation that we're in. I'm laughing.
Uh,
It's kind of entertaining.
there's an interesting kind of venerable saying that came out of World War II, and it was kind of like if you're taking a whole lot of flack, you must be over the target. And what you've got here in terms of Musk and all of the people that are vocal about what they're trying to do here is that those what you're and you're uncovering it. It's becoming obvious that there's all kinds of waste and abuse and fraud and other kind of things underneath the system, and it's and it's hurting a lot of people who are taking it and taking advantage of that. And so, on one hand, I think it's an amazing thing that is being done here. I mean, like I can't think of any time in certainly American history where anybody has come in and so quickly and rapidly and tried to change the fundamental direction of the country, and particularly the bureaucracy and the structures underneath it. And so it's Earth's it's breathtaking kind of in terms of its magnitude, and it's brilliant, frankly, just in terms of executing in some kind of a strategic event like this thing. It's just nothing less than brilliant what they're doing, and they hopefully will be rather successful at it. The problem is what comes afterwards. What are they? They're clearing the ground from the old decrepit, uh, ineffective kind of system that exists right now. And that's got everybody's attention. But what's on the back end? Well, it's very interesting because this administration is full of technocracy, technocrats, if you will. Starting with Elon Musk and working their way all the way down through JD Vance and the PayPal mafia, as they call themselves, they used to call themselves. And what you have is a whole bunch of people who are cleaning the place up, who explicitly are interested in some kind of a technocratic kind of future on the back end. And so there's an interesting tension about all of that because on one hand, you really would like to get the place cleaned up because the way it's going, if you leave it alone, it's going down the toilet. It's going to hit the wall in 2 years, and the financial system will collapse, and there won't be any Medicare or Social Security or pensions or anything, and the government won't even be able to fund itself. And there are some very authoritative forecasters who say that what you're going to get is a collapse of the United States, and after 2027, there'll be, yeah, and the reorganization into about 5 different countries going up to 2032, which is kind of wild and crazy. And just to think about it by itself, how in the world do you reconfigure the largest, most complex country in the history of the planet into 5 different ones all within, and you collapse the first one and then you stand up 5 different ones and all in 5 years? Well, the only way you do that is with AI, frankly, because it allows you to generate. And if you want to take advantage of that dynamic in the context of what we're talking about, a new world, well, you could start with a new country. I'd take a new country to start with, and we could head off. But the way you build that new country is with all of these tools and things that start to give you ideas and concepts and ways to go down there. And so uh, somewhere you're going to have to navigate down the middle of this thing to where you take the gains, the early gains, but you don't get swept downstream by the technology kind of track, because there is a very distinct, and this is not a theoretical scenario. This is there's a lot of scenarios have a great deal of uncertainty in them. You don't know which way, you don't know what way it could go. It could go this way. It could go this way. It's very, very clear that there is huge kind of push to digitize everything, and and if you can do that, whether it's money or whether it's your car or whether it's your location or anything else, then you get to a place where they can control you. And they're very explicit in saying that they want to be able to control everybody. And so there's a place 2 years from now, if not sooner, where if you are generating ideas and being vocal about it and they don't like it, they could make your car not work any further than a quarter of a mile from your house, or they could make your money not work any further than a quarter of a mile from your house, or they could only allow you to use your money to buy potatoes or something, or they may not allow your money to work for anything, or and it gets a whole lot worse, Harlan. I mean, it gets to the place where there's literally technology in place right now where they can put thoughts in your mind, in your brain, and they can extract what you're thinking about from a distance, maybe satellites, certainly from aircraft, maybe even from 5G towers. There's just it's an extraordinary dystopian 1984 kind of scenario, and we need to be aware of that. We need to think about that. We gotta need to know that that's in the works and that that's what we're working against. And it's not any different than any other kind of significant thing that you would classify as a threat. It's something that you've got to think about. And if you don't if you don't find an alternative, then you're likely to be caught up in that whole process. And so again, that's what motivates us here at the Arlington Institute, because we think that we've got to take advantage of this AI. We've got to utilize it. We've got to co-opt it, if you will, so that we can use it for the best ends. And by the way, we haven't talked about alien life or climate change or any number of other kind of variables. I wrote the second book I wrote was about wild cards, big surprise events, and so there's certainly some things that are coming in that's studded in the middle of all of this stuff that's coming that it could really change the way we all think and how we all live. And so it's really going to be a very interesting and fascinating time.
You know, some of the things you mentioned already happened when there was that big trucker strike. They did control people's
Yeah,
money. And I have a friend in Colorado that's this amazing mushroom expert that's making all these mushroom healing elixirs and all this stuff. And she's getting totally shut down on social media. And other people I know have their social media completely shut down that have been doing positive work. So we're already in the midst of what you were saying. And I think, though, it's important, though, that we also shouldn't succumb to the fear of that. And it's good to know about it. You're pointing it out. It is a very scary thing to think that, we're being taken over. And like even our smartphones, they keep upgrading them to be able to track and get more information and listen to us and do all these things. And of course, we are so addicted. Like if you lose our phones, it's like your whole world comes crumbling to an end, right? We use them
yeah.
constantly for everything, to communicate, for maps, for information, and it's a very positive thing. But then they're used they, and who is they? They is this external negative kind of control force that's been here on planet Earth for a long time. I subscribe to, there's a woman named Lisa Renee that has a website, Energetic Synthesis. I met her in person, which she no longer does public events or anything, back in 2009. And she uses a general term for this controlling force, which she abbreviates as the NAA. And this touches on something that you just mentioned that we haven't discussed yet. And NAA stands for the Negative Alien Agenda. And so, I think it's important, though, that, some people in the 3D world are like, what are you, crazy? The world's not controlled by negative aliens. Come on, it's just humans. We're just doing our thing here. But I think in seeing the big picture of what's going on and trying to synthesize, our path out of this to kind of recognize and acknowledge this negative alien agenda. And then, whatever forms, other people will call it the deep state, the cabal, the Illuminati, the reptilians, there's a ton of names that people, kick around. That's all kind of can be summed up under that NAA, a very nice, simple little abbreviation. And then I really liked, I think it was Magenta Pixie, who I saw years ago, said there's three steps. One, acknowledge this, recognize that it's happening, but then say, I do not consent. And once you see it, you can choose out. We are divine, sovereign, powerful beings. We're not just these little 3D humans that are under the control of this, fearful agenda, but we're super powerful. We are the God source incarnate. We are ultimately powerful. So I do not consent. But then the third and most important thing is to not want to destroy them, lock them up, kill them, because that's their game. To love them for illuminating us on our path. And you always talk, and you ended that great talk you did last year at Tesla Tech with love being the key. So I'll throw that all out for you to kind of rant on the whether aliens or love or whatever you need to help us, see and create this future that we're all working towards making happen. This,
Uh, I grew up in the Midwest in Nebraska in the United States, and which was kind of quite conservative at that time. And I grew up in a very conservative religious environment. My father was a traveling minister and evangelist. I went to a Christian college. Our whole upbringing was around the church. We had no friends of the family that were outside of the church. And so I'm very familiar with and from and influenced by all of that. It's a kind of the principles in particular are an integral part of how I frame my life and how I try to think about things. But what's happening here is that there is a whole new a new world that's emerging, and it's going to operate on a whole different set of principles and stuff. And what we need to do is well, we need to think specifically before the fact about what those things are so that they become the essence of what shapes this new reality, and that it colors who we are and how we act and how we behave. So, in the context of this new world, what we really need to do is consider uh, what the implications are. I started this by talking about that there's a kind of a conventional world and there's an unconventional world, and that the conventional world is, which is a place where most futurists exist, which is all about economics and energy and politics and that kind of stuff. But there's a other dimensional kind of world that is very, very real, and it has significant influence over who we are and how this all works. And it has for forever. The best information that I can find say that they've been here for at least 300,000 years. They were here essentially before humans were kind of fully developed or significantly developed, and so they're there, and they have objective and an agenda. I have friends who talk to them, supposedly, and there's a small number who are kind of the negative ones, and who really want to take over the planet and eliminate or make subservient human beings. And there are a larger number that are just kind of going along, and and just like humanity, there's a smaller segment that are really quite interested in the being beneficial to humanity in one way or another. But they've had, and so these entities are both kind of multidimensional, ephemeral, spiritual, if you will. That is to say, spirits, kind of in a way. And then there seem to be, of course, the extraterrestrials who may have come from other planets or from within the Earth or wherever it may be, but they seem to operate kind of principally in the three-dimensional kind of space, or in a significant way in the three-dimensional space. The archons and the jinn and the reptilians operate on the fourth and fifth dimensional space, and they come in for a while and so on. And all of it is very, very real. I mean, there are and we ignore them and discount them at our peril, frankly, because they're part of the deck. They're part of the reality that we all live with. And so they are, and we are at a place in time, an interesting place of time, where it's becoming rapidly and increasingly clear that there are this is a multidimensional kind of space in which we operate in, and that and that we need to take those into consideration. Now, the way you do that, one of the ways, as you've suggested, that you deal with this is that you become, let's say, uninteresting to them. Now, because like anything, people focus on those things that they're interested in, and the principal way that you become uninteresting to some of these, particularly the spiritual, the archons and the jinn and the reptilians, is that they feed off a negative energy. They feed off of the energy that humans generate when they are fearful, or whether they're painful, or whether it's terrorized, and so on. And you might ask yourself, so why over time have humans not learned that wars and things, and particularly say in the Middle East where they're just always fighting and everything. Well, why can't they get smart about all of this stuff over time? Well, one really good argument or one explanation might be that is because they're being encouraged in that regard, because we generate all this negative energy from war, and that's lunch for these entities. They feed off of all of that, and so they need to keep it all going. Now, this gets, there's a rabbit hole here that you can get down to. And then you can say, well, then how does uh, how does reincarnation work? And you can make a very interesting argument that reincarnation is just the effort by some of these entities to just keep you back into the system, so that you keep generating the energy that they can feed on. Now, the other side of this, interestingly, is the one that you suggest, which is about love. And so I'm of the opinion that, this new track that we need to go on, this new track has got to be non-threatening. It's essentially got to be about love. It's about cooperation. And what you get in that process is a kind of a de facto protective cocoon, if you will, that you're not of interest to any of those guys because you're not lunch, right? That you're not generating the kind of energy that they live on, that they want. And so if you can not threaten, no, yeah, I mean, the natural inclination for lots of humans is to fight them. Well, all that does is generate more of that kind of negative energy. And so there's a real that, like we talked about, a mind shift, like, as Willis Harman said, there's a mind shift that needs to happen here, a mind change that starts to see ourselves and see the world in a really fundamentally different way. And frankly, if you don't threaten them, if we go off on our own direction and we start our own thing, we're not going to take anything away from them. They can go do whatever they want. Everybody can do whatever they want to do, frankly. And we can go off and we can literally build a new world. And so, but I think you've got to consider all of these things as part of the same environment.
Yep, that's great. Well, we've been talking for almost the hour here, and that was such a, I think, great way to end with such a positive message as to, what is going on. I mean, that whole idea, of course, there's a term that's been used, kicked around for that, which is creating loosh, and so mention that.
Yes.
But like you say, it's as simple. And like I like your terminology, become uninteresting to them, right? We can go off and not we recognize that's what's happening and not feed them anymore, and they'll exist wherever they exist, and we'll create this beautiful new heart-centered, loving, organic world
Yeah.
that's benefits not just humans but all life. That's been my mission. That's your mission. So I really appreciate this conversation we had today, and of course I'm really looking forward to coming on March 22nd in person to meet you and be presenting there, and just being connected for the future, just working together. So, any last closing remarks you want to say? Of course, you have your website, Arlington Institute, and Transition Talks that people can check out other, things that you've produced. And yeah, please, just any closing remarks for this.
Well, thank you. Thank you. All I can say is that this requires us all to stand up. This is not a time for a passive kind of feel good and sit back and presume that it's all going to work out all right. This is literally a time when we stand up and become something different, this new human. And that means you need to be engaged, and you need to be actively engaged, and you need to be intellectually engaged, and in your work, and where you put your time and your money and whatever other kinds of things. And so it's a marvelous, extraordinary opportunity, and unprecedented. I mean, when else do you get a chance to play and some kind of make a contribution to the emergence of a whole new world? I mean, this is amazing, and a whole new era. And so it behooves all of us to kind of get together and cooperate and to try to find a way forward. through all of this. And we need to do that, and we need to do that in a hurry. And so, thanks for the opportunity to come and be with you, Harlan. We've got, as you say, you can find out all about the Arlington Institute at arlingtoninstitute.org. And you can see about transition talks, and you can sign up for Harlan's talk on the 22nd of March at transitiontalks.org. And we just hope, and you can do it by live stream, or you can be here in Berkeley Springs, West Virginia, either way. And we hope that you'll all come and be a part of that.
Great. Thanks so much, John. And thanks for everyone watching this. Remember, of course, like, subscribe, and we'll see you on the next Portal to the New Earth video. And until then, thank you very much, John. Okay.
Thank you.